don't like girls. I mean, I do, just not like you guys do.
I think we all know that Netflix sometimes pushes certain agendas in their top-rated shows for people to see, like they did with Noah Schnapp's character. But this time, when it comes to the show's ending, we can't really blame Netflix for it, because the Duffer Brothers decided not to kill anyone in the ending, and instead keep the door open for future projects so they can keep making money. And if you don't believe me, just look up Stranger Things. Tales from '85, which is scheduled to release on Netflix in 2026, with some reports pointing to the second half of the year, or even spring 2026. But I wish the writers had butchered the top 3 characters in the end to make it more impactful. If they couldn't come up with a powerful ending that really leaves an impact on fans, they should have at least let Vecna go berserk and kill off Will Byers. And you know what's more awful? Then hearing Will say, "I'm gay," after sitting through more than 10 hours of it, I'm left with this overwhelming feeling that none of that time really mattered. Not because I didn't understand what the show was trying to do, but because it genuinely felt like a waste. Even worse, it made me feel a little foolish for ever getting attached to these characters in the first place. And that frustration mostly comes from the sense that the writers were simply too scared to take risks. Instead of ending the show with something bold or challenging, they settled for the safest possible route, turning the final season into the most generic, bland, soap opera-style version of Stranger Things we've ever seen. It didn't go out with a bang like it once promised. It went out with a tired, quiet shrug. The thing is, I probably wouldn't care this much about how the show ended if it weren't for one very important reason. The first season of Stranger Things is still one of the greatest seasons of television I've ever watched. The writing was incredibly tight, and every single character actually mattered. Each person served a purpose in the story, reacting in believable ways to the strange events and missing people in Hawkins. It knew exactly when to be creepy and when to be fun, and even though there were dramatic moments, they always felt earned instead of forced. What really made that first season special, though, was the mystery. We didn't know much about Eleven's powers, the Demogorgon, or the Upside Down, and that lack of explanation made everything scarier. Because when you leave things to the imagination, your brain fills in the gaps in much more unsettling ways. Once you start over-explaining every detail of a monster or spending endless time wandering around its lair with no real danger, the fear disappears. Fast forward nearly a decade later, and the show has completely lost that magic. Instead of building tension, it's turned into a self-parody that seems far more interested in melodrama than suspense. Starting around season 4, most of the main characters stopped serving any real purpose in the story. Even though the cast kept growing, the writers became weirdly unwilling to kill off anyone the audience liked. That habit actually started way back in season 1, when Steve Harrington was originally supposed to die. But the creators liked Joe Keery too much to go through with it. That decision made sense at the time, but it set a dangerous precedent. Now every new character who joins the main cast comes with plot armor so thick it's practically visible. The show developed this pattern where each season introduces one likable new character whose only real job is to die. Even characters people genuinely loved, like Eddie Munson, ended up hurting the story more than helping it. Eddie took up a lot of screen time and emotional weight that could have gone to characters we've followed for years. Imagine how impactful his heroic sacrifice would have been if it belonged to Steve or Dustin instead. That kind of death would have been shocking and meaningful, but Eddie's fate felt obvious from the moment he was introduced. So when the final season rolled around, you'd think all bets would be off. This was it. There was no next season to protect. The stakes should have been higher than ever. But instead, the show doubled down on playing it safe. The Upside Down, which was once terrifying, barely feels dangerous anymore. Last season, we were told that even touching the vines could alert Vecna through the hive mind. But now characters run around shouting, stopping to chat, and wandering freely without any real fear. What makes this worse is that the show constantly pauses its action for emotional conversations in places that are supposed to be deadly. These moments are clearly trying to recreate the natural drama of the early seasons, but they never work because there's no real tension underneath them. In order for emotional release to feel satisfying, there has to be genuine danger first. Here, that danger just isn't present. Vecna, who should feel like an overwhelming threat, barely interacts with the main cast for most of the season. Instead, his focus is on a separate group of kids we're suddenly expected to care about, even though the show already has too many characters. At this point, killing a few people off would actually help streamline the story, but the writers seem terrified of upsetting viewers. As a result, scenes set in the Upside Down might as well be happening in normal Hawkins. The only difference is a gloomy blue filter slapped over endless arguments that get resolved minutes later. Demogorgons are barely present, and when they do show up, they're oddly harmless. The same goes for the Demodogs and even the bat swarms that were such a big deal before, and then mysteriously vanished. It becomes hard to take any of this seriously when monsters that once felt unstoppable now casually stroll past main characters or attack so slowly that it feels staged. Even when they land hits, those hits rarely matter. The show refuses to kill off even minor characters who no longer serve a purpose. Imagine how much stronger the story could have been if someone like Mr. or Mrs. Wheeler actually died. That kind of loss could have pushed Mike and Nancy into meaningful development and given the group real motivation beyond vague heroics. Instead, we get convenient rescues and last-second saves that drain scenes of any lasting impact. If the show isn't going to be wild and fun like Season 3, with giant flesh monsters and fireworks, then it should at least pretend that the stakes are real. But most of the season's big moments are all style with no substance. Even when something visually impressive appears, like the Mind Flayer's physical form, it doesn't do anything meaningful before being defeated almost immediately. The runtime only makes this worse. Each season keeps getting longer, even though there's more filler than ever. This final season demands over 10 hours of your time, yet so much of it feels pointless. Emotional moments are staged like they're meant to be clipped into short social media edits, complete with dramatic music, rather than serving the story. Power scaling is wildly inconsistent too. Vecna is built up as this all-powerful villain, yet the military somehow sets up an entire fortress in the Upside Down without resistance. For someone who supposedly hates humanity, he's remarkably ineffective at stopping them. This contradiction makes him feel less threatening and more pathetic. The emotional scenes don't help either. Characters constantly stop what they're doing to talk about their feelings, even when they're supposed to be in immediate danger. One argument between Steve and Dustin feels especially forced, existing only to reveal a secret room before being instantly resolved. It adds nothing to the story and feels completely out of character. Then there's the awkward love triangle subplot involving Nancy, Steve, and Jonathan. It goes nowhere and gives these characters very little to do. Jonathan, in particular, feels like a shadow of his former self. He was once a deeply emotional character driven by grief and family, but now he barely interacts with Will, even though their bond was foundational to the show. The creators like to claim they planned everything from the start, but that's hard to believe given the endless retcons. Vecna himself is a good example. Introducing a human-like villain was a solid idea, but the way his backstory is handled strips away the mystery. The show insists he's been part of the plan all along, even though earlier seasons clearly weren't written with him in mind. The more the show explains the Upside Down and Vecna's motivations, the less interesting they become. Horror thrives on ambiguity, but this season is obsessed with answers. It keeps rewriting its own rules and ignoring established dangers, like the toxic atmosphere or the importance of the vines. Production issues also hurt the finale. The long gap between seasons killed momentum, forcing the writers to reset the story instead of building directly on the previous cliffhanger. Everything gets toned down so hype can be rebuilt, even though Season 4 already did most of that work. By the end, it feels like the show exists to be consumed once and forgotten, designed for binge-watching and online clips rather than rewatching. Nothing truly changes, because change might upset viewers. Everything is spelled out repeatedly, as if the audience can't follow along without constant reminders. The final battle is shockingly short and bloodless. No one important is seriously hurt, and the ending tries to satisfy everyone by keeping characters both alive and dead at the same time. Eleven's fate is especially frustrating, existing in this weird limbo that lets viewers believe whatever version they prefer. It's clever in a cynical way because it avoids committing to anything.
I believe. I believe.
Despite all of this, the season was a massive success in terms of numbers. People watched it and talked about it, and Netflix already has spin-offs planned. All of that success rests on the legacy of a first season that felt fresh, suspenseful, and emotionally honest. The finale did make me emotional, but not because the story earned it. It was because of the constant flashbacks to the early days, reminding me of when this show first exploded in 2016. It was new, exciting, and unburdened by franchise thinking. I wanted to love this ending, I really did. But it's hard to watch something you once cared deeply about fade into something so safe and hollow. And disliking something you once loved is far more painful than never caring at all. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.